Hello, BookTube. Well, I have a book haul for you today. Yesterday, I went to my local half price books and I came home with a pile of books. I know that I've been talking about getting rid of my collection, so it might seem strange that I'm continuing to add to that collection, but the fact of the matter is like I said before when I was talking about giving away my books, I like books to come in and go out and come in and go out. So right now, a bunch of books came in, and that means a bunch of books need to go out. So we'll keep on top of that book giveaway. But regardless, I wanted to go over the books that I got because I found a lot of really great things and a lot of things that I'm really excited to read. I mentioned in a previous video that I know that my next month's reading is going to be informed by book hauls like this. So some of the books here are definitely going to end up on the pile for next month's reading, for sure. But to start, I found this anthology of the Enlightenment by Peter Gay. Peter Gay is a historian who wrote extensively about the Enlightenment. He wrote at least one 2 volume history of the Enlightenment, and then he wrote a variety of other books on the Enlightenment. One of them is called The Enlightenment and Interpretation. He is a very well known and very well respected scholar on the Enlightenment, and he's branched out. I know that he wrote a book about postmodernism or modernism somewhat recently, which was interesting. So he's written a lot. He also wrote, I think, a biography. I think it was a biography of Freud. So he's an interesting guy, and I've never read him before. But I saw this anthology, and I wanted to pick it up because I was giving a quick perusal of the glossary, or I'm sorry, the table of contents, and there was a lot of really good stuff in here that I recognized and thought this is great. For some reason, the Enlightenment is uniquely set up for anthologies like this. I think because a lot of these books by these Enlightenment thinkers are not masterpieces in and of themselves. They're more expressions of ideas. And it's more about the idea itself than the sort of like lyrical execution of said idea. So the entire works of some of these Enlightenment thinkers are not classics in and of themselves, but their ideas are revolutionary and interesting. So an anthology like this that really sort of condenses a lot of those Enlightenment ideas down into one volume is, I think, a really good idea. And so I'm not a big enjoyer of anthologies. I don't have many of them, but I saw this and thought, well, this is definitely something that I think is worth having. So I've got that. It says here on the back, the Enlightenment is the classic and definitive work for students of Enlightenment culture. This wide-ranging anthology has been compiled, edited, and introduced by the Enlightenment historian Peter Gay, who studied the Enlightenment and interpretation, won him in 1967 the 1967 National Book Award. Professor Gay begins with precursors whose works were seminal, such as Lucretius, Montaigne, Bacon, Newton, and Locke. He goes on to present the major intellectual figures of the Enlightenment: Voltaire, Rousseau, Diderot, Hume, Kant, et al., and also includes many important but less familiar figures of the movement. Some selections have been translated especially for this volume and were not previously available in English. Each of the anthology's 7 major divisions, as well as individual selection, as well as each individual selection, is introduced by an explanatory headnote. There are biographical references throughout. For a comprehensive understanding of the Enlightenment, this compilation is indispensable. So this is great to have. I was glad to find it. Next, we have The Star Thrower by Lauren Isley. And this is actually introduced by W.H. Auden, which I thought was really cool. I've never read Lauren Isley before. I'm aware of who he is, and actually, that's a lie. I have read a little bit of Lauren Isley. I had an electronic version of one of his books a while ago, and I can't remember which one it was. I think I checked it out from the library. I didn't end up finishing it. Um, I'm not I'm not skeptical of Lauren Isley. The only thing is that there are certain science communicators, and Lauren Isley was a very famous science communicator for his time. I don't think he's very well read anymore, though I could be wrong about that. But the nice thing about Lauren Isley, or the thing about Lauren Isley, was I felt like his prose was extremely like manicured. And when I read somebody like Carl Sagan, I love Carl Sagan, and Carl Sagan is eloquent without it feeling like there's much of a put on. I don't really know if that's a really good description, but when I was reading Lauren Isley, I felt like it was a little too like he was trying to write like it felt much more manufactured. His eloquence felt like much more manufactured. So that isn't a criticism of him because I didn't finish what I was reading, and various things were happening at the time. So I definitely want to read this in its totality just to see more about who this guy is and experience his writing the way that it should be experienced. So I'm excited to read this. But science communication is something that I'm pretty passionate about. I've read a lot of books like this. That's why I'm aware of Lauren Isley. So it's something that I think can be done well, and it's also something that I think can be done badly. So I wanted to read this and give this a shot. And the fact that this is introduced by Auden, I thought was really really cool. So I picked that up as well. The next one is a strange one. This is the Pope's Greatest Adversary. Gir- Girolamo Savonarola. I don't actually know how to pronounce his first name. That's funny. But Savonarola is the famous monk, famous for the Bonfire of the Vanities. This is written by someone named Samantha Morris. And I knew of this book's existence before I saw it in my half price books. And when I saw it there, I snagged it right away. This is a nice little short book on Savonarola. I'm aware of him as a sort of proto Reformation figure. He's he was a monk who was protesting against the corruption and the vanity of the Catholic Church, and then this eventually led to the very public protest, which was the Bonfire of the Vanities, and then he met a violent end. I believe he was burned at the stake as a heretic. So, this is exciting. I think that Savonarola, as a sort of proto Reformation figure, he was a little bit different because he thought of himself, I believe, as a prophet and imagined that he was a pretty cool guy, which a lot of Reformation figures did. But I think that the charge of heresy was particularly appropriate for him because I believe he thought of himself as, like, a prophet for the end of days or something like that. And eventually that's what led to his downfall because I believe the people turned on him, and that led directly to his execution. So this will be a fun thing to read. I'm looking forward to it. Um, and I don't know anything about Samantha Morris, so we'll see where this book comes from. Next, I got Post War by Tony Jute. This is a history of Europe since 1945. As somebody who reads a lot of history, this is definitely a book that I was familiar with. I recognized it right away. This is obviously a library copy, which is kind of cool. Doesn't seem like it was checked out all that often. From the Ohio Business College in Sandusky. So kind of strange that it ended up here, but that's cool. And this is a very popular book, so I definitely knew of its existence. And it's another book that kind of relates to an aforementioned pile that I've talked about on this channel, that small, destitute pile related to World War II. So I'm excited to add this to that pile. It's not directly related to World War II because it's covering history after World War II, but it looks great. And you know, the history after World War II is one that includes a lot of upheaval geopolitically that I'm familiar with. So I know more about this subject than I do about World War II itself, actually. So I'm excited to read this, and I'm impressed by how big it is. I love myself a really good, really large book of history. So this is an exciting thing, and I thought that this was the perfect opportunity to pick this up and actually read it. So I'm excited about that. The next is my first volume of Stephen Jay Gould, The Flamingo's Smile. I've heard a lot about Stephen Jay Gould, another science communicator. This is a very, look at how nice this is. I loved the cover and I loved the way that this was printed. This is put out by Norton, but, and I'm not sure if you can see this that well, for some reason, the text falls down the spine of the book. There's all of this empty space along the margins on the edges here, but then it just goes straight down the spine, which I thought was really strange. And it's not a deal breaker because I still got it and I'm still excited to read it, but I was almost wondering if this was misprinted because I've never seen a book printed so far over like this. I mean, it's not centered at all, and you really have to hold the book open a lot wider than I'm used to holding books open in order to read each line. So it's a little strange, but regardless, I love the way that this is. I love this cover and I love the back here, and I'm a big fan of Norton as a publisher. And Stephen Jay Gould is somebody who I haven't read, but again, I've heard a lot about, and I really want to read him. So I saw this in the bookstore and picked it up right away. So I'm excited. I'm excited to add this to my pile. This is definitely going on next month's pile for sure. The next is The Seven-Story Mountain by Thomas Merton. This is the one that I ordered online used. And I got it because, and I actually hauled it on this channel before, but this is Catherine Ann Porter, Pale Horse, Pale Rider. And I mentioned in that video when I was hauling it how much I loved this hardcore brace modern classic edition. And I didn't have any of these, and I didn't realize how awesome they were. So when I was holding this, I resolved to get more of them. On the back, it shows all of the hardcore brace modern classics. So I went through and tried to see which ones I could get my hands on. This is the first one that I got. Thomas Merton, The Seven-Story Mountain. Definitely have heard of it. I am not Catholic myself. This is from Thomas Merton was a Catholic priest. So but nevertheless, I'm still interested in it. I've heard good things about it, and he talks about a lot of things that I'm familiar with, or a lot of things that I feel a personal connection to as well. His life in reading is one of those things. Reading Joyce, reading all sorts of fiction and nonfiction as well. So I'm excited. I don't actually really know much about it, but I know that, in fact, let's read this from the inside jacket here. Within a year of its publication in 1948, The Seven-Story Mountain had sold hundreds of thousands of copies and had become a classic for Catholics and non-Catholics alike. This unique spiritual autobiography is the account of the growing restlessness of a brilliant and passionate young man whose search for peace and faith eventually led him, at the age of 26, to take vows in one of the most demanding religious orders, the Trappists, at the monastery within the, quote, four walls of my new freedom. Merton wrote his extraordinary testament, the document of a man who withdrew from the world only after he had fully immersed himself in it. And I'm about to turn 26 myself, so maybe this will be the book that makes me become a Trappist monk. I don't know. We'll see. But I'm excited to read this, and I've always loved Augustine's Confessions, so this is something a much more modern Confessions, I guess. So I'm excited to read this, and this is going on the pile for next month as well, for sure. And then the last two, I'll put them up together because they are related to each other. I got them for the same reasons. One is The Black Prince by Henry Dwight Sedgwick, and then the other one is The Will of Zeus by Stringfellow Barr. In both cases, I don't know who either of these gentlemen are, but these are both Barnes and Noble books, which I have a sweet tooth for. I love these hardcovers, which I mean were printed in like the '90s, and they're just bulletproof. I mean, they're just so beautiful to read from. I have a couple of them, and they're just awesome. These are definitely older pieces of scholarship, and it's a window into a world that has since passed us by. Barnes and Noble does not print books like this anymore, and these are scholars that nobody reads anymore. I'm sure. I mean, I've never heard of them, which certainly doesn't mean that nobody reads them. But I was looking a little bit online, and I didn't see much information there either. So I'm pretty certain that these books are kind of, forgotten about. But I nevertheless have such a sweet tooth for them. I've been enjoying reading them, and again, it's a window into a vanished world, I think, both in terms of the content and in terms of the physical package of these books. So I can't pass them up. And in fact, there's a lot of them at my local half-price books, and I have to restrain myself from buying them all every time I walk in. Anytime I see this Barnes and Noble at the bottom, I zero in on it right away and at least give it a perusal. But I decided to settle on these two. Both of them were in the clearance section. About to, I guess, I don't know what happens. I should ask somebody at my local half price books what happens if a book's been sitting in the clearance section for a while. Does it get thrown out? Does it get donated somewhere? I don't know. But these were sitting there, and I just was like, yeah, no, I'm going to rescue these. So that's it. That's my book haul. I hope that you enjoyed watching. I'm very excited. A lot of these books are definitely going to be on the pile for next month, so I'm looking forward to reading a lot of them very soon. And we'll see. That's pretty much it today. Thank you, BookTube.